Good morning, Georgianna. I hope this finds you doing well on this Monday morning and that you're ready for a great week. We're just coming off an amazing week of youth camp and celebrating so many good things. And we have a full summer of activities prepared for us. And we're just super excited about what's going on in the life of Georgianna. I also want to take a moment this morning and thank Jen Helms for having stepped in last week. She has a pure heart for God, and we love that she is an emerging voice in our church. And it has been a joy for me to watch her grow spiritually and to use her gifts. And I know that you'll be seeing more of her in the future. So we find ourselves in the book of Ezekiel. And so Ezekiel is kind of this odd prophet in the Old Testament. His writings are the closest thing that we have to Revelation. So the book of Ezekiel is similar in nature in terms of visions and mysteries that the book of Revelation is in the New Testament. We also know that the prophet Ezekiel writes from Babylonian captivity. He's been taken away. His heart is broken for Jerusalem. In fact, the word he has from God is about the demise of Jerusalem. And so when we find ourselves where we are today in our devotional book, which is chapter 20, verse 21, it's a little bit of a history lesson. So the power of the verse of 21 comes from understanding the backstory. So I'm going to go back up a little bit and read to you beginning in verse 17 of Ezekiel chapter 20. The prophet writes, and these are the words of the Lord, "Yet I looked on them with pity and did not destroy them or put an end to them in the wilderness. I said to their children in the wilderness, do not follow the statutes of your parents or keep their laws or defile yourselves with their idols. I am the Lord your God. Follow my decrees and be careful to keep my laws. Keep my Sabbaths holy, that you may be a sign between us. Then you will know that I am the Lord your God. But the children rebelled against me." This is the verse that we're in. "But the children rebelled against me. They did not follow my decrees. They were not careful to keep my laws, of which I said. And the person who obeys them will live by them. And they desecrated my Sabbaths. So I said I would pour out my wrath on them and spend my anger against them in the wilderness." But listen to God carefully here. "But I withheld my hand, and for the sake of my name, I did what would keep it from becoming profaned in the eyes of the nations in whose sight I had brought them out of. Also with an uplifted hand, I swore to them in the wilderness that I would disperse them among the nations and scatter them through the countries." So we've got a little bit of a history lesson here. He's talking about the children in the wilderness coming out of Egypt and the fact that they worshipped idols and they desecrated the Sabbath and they did all these things. But he also forecasts his present situation, which God had said to them at that time he would disperse them. And this is the great diaspora, the spreading of Jews throughout Babylonia from captivity, from being taken as slaves. So the prophet writes from this place of mourning. And so his word for us is he says, listen, the children rebelled against me. And I don't know about you as a parent or as a grandparent or what you do when your children are in a season of rebellion against you. You know what's good for them. You have wisdom for them. You're trying to guide them, forge a path for them, and they choose rebellion over obedience. This is the state of all people at some point. We all have moments where we choose rebellion over obedience. We find this in the Christian church. Jesus gives us commands, and then we choose rebellion over obedience. And so God says in the middle of this that there are consequences for this. If you're not going to keep my Sabbath holy, if you're going to desecrate my Sabbath with your behavior or chasing after things, then there will be consequences. I think the hardest thing for us is that we expect God to initiate grace, and he certainly does that. And we expect God to initiate forgiveness, and he certainly does that by placing his son on the cross. But I think there's an assumption in this grace and this forgiveness that there are no consequences for our sinful behavior. So church, I think the lesson for us today in the book of Ezekiel is that God continues to warn us, continues to cry out to us to follow his ways, to keep his commands, and to keep his Sabbath holy. And so what does that look like, to keep the Sabbath holy? Well, it is to make God and family and fellowship a priority. I think this is the great challenge for the church in North America now. For an entire year, you drifted away from having to be present in the house of God. And now people are slowly returning. And I think this is what this passage is about, is that God's warning to say, listen, keep my Sabbaths holy, gather with my children and my people, be obedient. Otherwise, there will be consequences. And so, church, I just want to call you to a place of obedience this week where we look at the commands of Jesus and we say, I want to follow them. Well, I hope this has been helpful to you, kind of an insight into the book of Ezekiel. I know we'll be back in this book again next week. Know that I love you. Grateful for this morning time that we have together. It's a breath of fresh air for me, and I pray it's a breath of fresh air for you. Peace and shalom to you. We'll see you next week.